Yeah, great. Thanks everyone for showing up. I think general for the gostin for the second weekend, whenever new people come on or so, I'm still, as my original intent was, just happy if anyone does some cross showcases using one tool with another. But I think this meeting is particular because I think the push came from probably Miguel, Bain, Dom, for this interest to have something more stable than just showcases a notebook that connects one thing to another, but to have something like a library that can be used to interact between one and the other, right? So I think the idea of this meeting is to focus on that, to initiate maybe some work on that this weekend and then probably the weeks to come. And I don't know, cool, Franklin is here. I don't know if he might be able to just give a quick overview of what OMF is. What was the idea behind it and where it will go, for everyone to know what that would be, and then in the discussions of X-array or OMF or NetCDF or whatever. But I don't know if Franklin went away for a sec.
He left.
I did have a relevant comment to that. I'm sure everyone is aware of the Open Geospatial Consortium. They like published a few newer specs recently where they implement more of these like 3D data types in. So like I think there's like a surface data type. It might, like I haven't really delved into it, so it might, but it might be specific to their water ML sort of initiative. So that's sort of like surface hydrology things, but there might be some overlap where you don't have to implement your own data types and you just encode these like various things in OMF that I was seeing like in existing data types that are supported by the OGC. So you get all the synergy, dumb word, but whatever, with the rest of like the GIS world. That's just something to consider. And I think also you can save spatial files like spatial data that OGC can read into NetCDF files. So you might gain some wins there by using NetCDF right as your data format on disk, but using the OGC's data type structures and specs to like load that.
Cool. And who is behind this Open Geospatial Consortium?
Oh, it's like everyone. It's like governments and like Esri and yeah, it's huge. OGC, it's like if you use QGIS, QGIS is like a reference, has like reference implementations of the various web GIS standards out there, and they're sort of expanding into 3D as well, right? Because a lot of the GIS have like sort of shape files, and the olden days were only 2.5D, right? They're really two-dimensional, but you could associate n many attributes to those like points, right? Or lines or polygons. But now they're really more pushing for better 3D support.
Okay. Interesting. Thanks. Yep. Definitely something I can do. And so Franklin, the similar for OMF.
Yeah. I feel like OMF sort of has like a similar goal. I don't know. It's a lot fresher, and it was mainly, well, the M is mining, so it was mainly something for the mining industry to kind of get around and agree on, and solve some of the interoperability issues there. And so I guess, yeah, I don't know. So it has some like block models are important, so it has some sort of 3D first thinking, I guess, which is maybe nice. I think that since it's newer and there's less less people involved, that probably means it's a bit more flexible for better or worse, but also I think like less people involved is also not a huge advantage when you're looking for support across other libraries. Yeah, I don't know.
And it's not Python specific, is it, Franklin? Like, because we're obviously we're all concerned about talking to each other within Python ecosystem, but
yeah. So I guess I updated that Markdown page a little bit with some thoughts the other day. But yeah, I think there's sort of three parts to it. So there's like the data structures. I feel like that's the most important part. So that's like just how shapes are represented, how you represent 3D objects with attributes on them, basically. And then there's like the file serialization itself, which is sort of significantly less important in my mind. Like that just gives you a file. But like for the first version of OMF, the serialization is really strange. And yeah, it's just like an arbitrary binary thing. Yeah, and then the Python library is that's just like the Python client implementation of it. That's the only client library that exists. I guess, yeah, there's like been some work on like a C# version, but that's only halfway done and not in great shape.
Yeah, a lot of this is sort of solved by the OGC, so I kind of posted a link back to their members. So what you would be sort of talking about is like implementing an OMF schema where you like say, we're gonna, I pick any, like, I don't know, like a sample is a 3D point and it'll have n attributes or something on it, like you enumerate those. So you can like use the existing standards from OGC to implement these various data types. That'll get you all the serialization for free, all the C, C++, Python, whatever interop, right?
Yep.
Web surfaces.
So I just want to try to add an idea here. So do you think that we are going to be able to create something new in terms of data structures, or agree in some data structures without creating a standard? Because I'm not looking to create yet another standard. Like, I guess that everybody is at that point. So I will really just go to a lower level, just like, okay, the way that we are going to communicate between our libraries are going to be pandas data frames for unstructured data, an X-array for structured data. And then we can wrap all of that in all the standards, and whoever wants to use those data for different libraries. And I think that is quite compatible with all the open mining format and also what you are showing now, Andrew. So for me, the more I was thinking this week about this, the more I was agreeing with Bain about this idea of PyVista being the bridge. I still disagree that we should put VTK into the game, but it's true that the structures of PyVista or the structures of VTK are all what you need to visualize all the 3D data that you can imagine. That's, oh well, or at least I can imagine at this moment. So if we are able to replicate that without having to install VTK and VTK tables, because PyVista, I think that at the moment is what it's using. So they have these poly data objects, that is unstructured data, and they have the structured grids. So if we can mimic pretty much one-to-one that just with X-array and with pandas data frames, then we should be able to import data and visualize it and then export it to the different libraries and formats.
Martin?
I think that's definitely a way to go with it. The one thing that I'm just thinking about as well is I think what we can do in terms of, having a reference implementation or something is that we can settle on certain conventions within that data. So sure, GemPy can read an X-array in if we give it, but we need to then do that additional massaging to make sure that it's got, X, Y, and Z. So either we need to come down on having a fairly prescriptive way of doing that, which then by default, our libraries work with this. So, when Fatyanda writes out to NetCDF, it writes out in a particular way that doesn't require anything fancy on GemPy's end. Or we need to allow for more flexibility in something like GemPy, where, you can assign what you want. And maybe we do both. But if you, I think as a structure, NetCDF is fine, and Xarray works really well with that. And I think that I'm not sure how easy that is to get into PyVista or something similar, but you know, if we're doing data frames, and we can decide what they stay as on disk, but if we're settling on data frames and Xarrays as this is the internal library we're using, then stuff should be fairly compatible. But then we need to look at the metadata that's associated with it.
Yeah,
and that's where I think we might have a headache.
So yeah, and I think also, I know I'm like really talking about the OGC. I like encourage everyone to read that stuff. I'm not saying like, you can definitely do like an intermediate step first where you get something working that's a bit better than what we have right now. But I think it makes sense to re-implement the OMF standard as like a schema or like well-known practices using the OGC data types, because it solves all these serialization problems. And then I'm not sure like where it's posted at this point, but like maybe it was on a PyVista issue where, right, like there's Xarray, but Xarray also like interrupts with pandas with the data array class, I think. I don't use it extensively enough to remember, but basically they're sort of like standard you know, calls that are exposed, like whether it's an Xarray object or a data array object or a pandas data frame object. And if you sort of keep to that like superset of common functions, you can write basically an agnostic interface where you don't really care if it's necessarily exactly a pandas data frame, or if it's a GeoPandas data frame, or if it's an Xarray data array, or like a Z array. Like there's a Z array, that's another thing that's out there for these sort of high performance things. So I think there's like, definitely do like the easiest stuff first, and then like there's some, I think, like evolution to a more agnostic, and what that'll end up doing, right, is reducing your code maintenance burden, because you're not worrying about how you serialize things or like testing which object it is and then doing the right function call if it's a data array or something else.
Coming out of things together, I might quick want to hear what Rowan has to say as someone who built a framework once, because of, I think, what Miguel said and others said, it should be minimal as possible, but yet allow many things to be incorporated. I think Simpeg is sort of an excellent example for that. And then after Rowan, also maybe Bain joined, so he might quick give a pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, was that Andrew who was just talking, or Miguel? Andrew, yeah. Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. Same sentiment to like, a lot of the development of the framework of Simpeg was all about the API development, and that allows a lot of changing of what components you use under the hood. Yeah, so that like you're caring about how you're interfacing with this stuff, and then that's actually the place in the implementation that you care about. And then you don't care about how it's stored or whatever, if it's X or Z or whatever array you're using. And so just figuring out what those internally to our community, I think that implementation is, as long as we're like even just trying to use something, it doesn't even really matter how good it is now. It's more the decision to use it, and then we can evolve it over time. And if we all sort of decide to point with our various repositories at this like nascent project, then it'll somewhat spring into existence and, I don't know, help on its own.
So you mean like not a compromise, that everybody says, yeah, we do support it.
Yeah, I think everybody here, like, we want to improve the interoperability in the geoscience community, and that starts by, well, just deciding that we should do that. And so having the minimal infrastructure and then evolving it over time to sort of take on more and more responsibilities, and then that piece is a shared resource.
Yeah. That's a good sentence. Yeah. Wayne, your thoughts from the VTK standpoint, probably.
I joined very late, and I'm sort of half working and half listening. So I'm curious, what's the status right now?
I'm probably interested because we had OMF and OTC, and then Miguel said he was in the beginning against using PyVista as the core, but now he thinks maybe it wouldn't be that bad because VTK has probably everything that would be required to display anything we need. So,
so specifically, it's not using PyVista so that we don't have to use VTK, but something structures that looks one-to-one to what you have in PyVista. That is my thought at the moment.
And at the very beginning of Gostin, you wrote something about your ideas of how that could work with PyVista, right?
Yeah, I go back and forth on this a lot because PyVista has really worked for me in the past quite well. Just because the data structures are capable of handling all the spatial data that I typically have encountered in sort of subsurface science. But as soon as you get into anything that is a non-Cartesian coordinates, you get into issues. And so that can be a deal breaker for a lot of people. And so that might be one sort of big red flag for not using something like PyVista or VTK. Because it's very much tied to a Cartesian or rectilinear coordinate system. So I think it'd be of value, and maybe this was said a minute ago, just to sort of follow what OMF did and sort of start from the scratch, start from the ground up, and not really take their work, but really take a lot of the ideas there and the structure of their classes and their data structures and re-implement that based on top of Xarray. That's what I think would be the best route forward. And then have that closely coupled with PyVista. So that way we have like a one-to-one mapping of this data type is basically the same data type in PyVista, and just maybe do one-to-one for each class we implement because PyVista can handle all those same data structures. But then if we down the road need to start expanding that to handle data that's in a spherical reference system, we can easily add in an additional model that doesn't necessarily have a one-to-one relationship with something on VTK or PyVista side, but we have sort of a routine that allows us to transform that coordinate system or subset it into something rectilinear that PyVista can then handle. And so that's maybe what I'm thinking now.
Then comes a question from me. Maybe I don't understand their point, because often Xarray is mentioned. Does that work really work nicely with data that is irregularly?
It becomes, oh yeah, you go.
I was going to say, I'm not familiar enough with Xarray to be able to say how nicely it plays with irregular data, but from my impression right now, my current understanding is it doesn't play well with irregularly structured data. So if you have a tetrahedralized mesh, being able to store those cell connectivities between, what nodes represent any given tetrahedral in your mesh, which I know like PyGimli needs. I don't know how to do that in Xarray without creating some sort of custom model.
N-dimensional NumPy array in the end, right? Under the hood of Xarray, just with labels and stuff. Fancy indexing and
yes, for best and worst, Xarrays always tend to be just one single NumPy array, multidimensional NumPy array, while Pandas is several NumPy arrays, and then they coordinate the logic of it. So for irregulars, I think that is Pandas better. And actually, in the website of Xarray, they recommend it that if you don't need to use multidimensional, you should use Pandas because it's faster. That's So I think that this combination of two, so using Pandas for what in PyVista you have polydata, and use Xarray for what you have in structured grids, could make it quite similar, very easy to plot, and still very Pythonic, that then everybody can extract it. So for me, so more than trying to agree here in a huge standard that if we put the goal too high, then nobody's going to go towards that. So for me, the only thing that I am a bit worried is this workflow of, and I have the feeling that there is a lot of code around and a lot of libraries that one is importing data from Petrel and the other is importing seismic, and in there you don't know where those things are. So if we just have a hub that we know that we import the data, and once it's a Panda data frame or an X-array, that's what the library does. And from there, you can just pull data.
Well, what Rowan said is really important because we have SIMPEG here, we have JumPy here, Fatian is not here, but I'm sure Leo would be up for it. And we have PyVista here. And if these 4 libraries would agree and say, we don't know how it's going to look like, and we don't know how it's going to be, what it's going to be called, and who's going to lead it, but we are going to use it, then it would already be enough inertia that it would exist, and then others might come in over time. No?
I'll second Martin on this. I think if we just all agree that the ins and outs are going to be Panda data frames and X-arrays, and then we can do the wrapper to OMF or any of those like serializations or like higher level storage after the fact, and it's all going to be easy because it's only going to be one or two objects to and out. So I would vote with Martin on this.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. I also did this brainstorming, and I think many of you worked on that. And I probably don't even go into this if we want to have the meeting, reduce it to a sensible time of an hour or so. But I think it's something we can work over on the weekend or in subgroups or on different, because if we start now with this, we're never going to finish, right? But I think there's a lot of information in it. But what I would be a bit more interested, I have this in the agenda in the markdown, is I think it will need someone like a bit leading it, not even necessarily code-wise, but someone who is a real interest and is steering it. Because, well, just to get a step back, the whole gostin, I was just a week ago, and there was nothing in the hackathon about EML potentials, and I co-host the morning sessions with Filippo, and just said, we have to do something, so I put it in. I had no idea what it is, and it kind of grew out of my original intent, which is really awesome. I think there was a lot happening in this channel, even just discussing things. But I don't think I'm like aligned with my project. This sort of package is what I want to focus on at the moment. But I think there are others that are very inclined to that. So I think we should use the remaining half an hour to keep it to an hour. Like who is really interested in it and willing to invest time. I know already Miguel even has that as part of his company, but also who are the other people, and maybe to get 2-3 persons to agree on that. I don't know, takers.
I can be the point person for SIMPEG, not that I'm the leader or anything, but I can work closely with Miguel to push it on the.
So in this case, this project to be really successful, we all have to agree. That's why I like a lot the idea of putting it in the software underground organization, like the common link of all of us. If it's subsurface, I will go to just take the project of last year also, because it was a bit where everything started. And I like the name, which is not easy to find a name. So if everybody is against that, just raise now the boys. But otherwise, tomorrow morning, I will just really go to the repo with you, Alex, if you're in the mood to start writing readmes and maybe making the high level structures, but hoping to develop as a community project. And in this, I don't have too much experience. Bain has way more, because in GeoSci is as like 80%. Luckily, now you guys start to jump in a bit. So you force me to move the development to the cloud that I like. But this one should be an open development since the beginning. So
cool. So you talk about the subsurface package, right, on software. So we'll probably have to check tomorrow, for instance, access right that we can give to that project, access right to the people interested in working on that. I always like today in the lightning talk of Leo, I liked his approach, because you often hear of testing first approach, but he said documentation first. And that might be a good thing for the subsurface package. So everybody who joins it has enough documentation to know what is the goal, and then could dig in to work for that goal in a way. So, and that would be Miguel for GemPy, Dom for SimPeg. I guess I will ask Leo if he can have an eye on it.
I'm happy to be involved too from a
cool.
not non-package specific perspective.
Cool. Yeah.
Some experience with building OMF without bringing that too much.
Let me speak to Matt and let me figure out if I can put any time, or if he'd like me to put any time towards this as well.
From agile perspective.
Yeah. If he's interested, I think he'll be interested. I don't know if he wants to specifically put time towards it, but I'll ask him. Yeah, my own background is mostly Fatyanda. I've never used any of the other libraries in this, but I've looked at most of them just out of curiosity, especially over the last week. But I'm most familiar with Fatyanda.
But that's great. And maybe Leo is too busy, but then Santiago might also be interested in keeping the links open.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. But I'll speak to Matt and find out if he's willing to, if he wants me to put time into this sort of company time, I should say. But otherwise, I might have to. I'm still interested in getting involved. It might just have to be less, but I'll confirm that as soon as I can. It's not the best week to speak to Matt about future plans, so. Or at least specifics of future plans. So.
I guess not even next week, because then he has like 1,000 projects that are lined up for the future. So, yeah. And Andrew would you have the boundary?
Yeah, I'm happy to continue backseat developing. So I'll just do a lot of comments and like ideas at you, but I'm way over prescribed as it is.
Cool. I'm paying you live on the internet anyway, so you're always around, right?
Me?
Yeah.
Ah, yes. I live in the internet.
You just told the no life bet.
Oh, he does. He just managed it very well.
Yeah. I mean, you're asking about sort of the buy-in from everybody here, and I think it should go without saying I'm stoked about this library and getting something to act as a glue between all of the software that's here today. And so I'm happy to contribute as much as I can, whatever that means. But as far as anything that has to do with PyVista, I'd happily sort of take on those assignments if someone needs to build up the linking between the tool we're making, those data structures, and creating sort of a cohesive way to go back and forth between PyVista and those data structures. I can definitely put a lot of effort into that.
And that's very valuable, because you have a lot of knowledge now with these mix-ins, right? These from mix-ins.
Yeah, and I think the challenging part there is going to be, and along with a lot of these libraries, is making sure you have a dynamic link going back and forth between these data structures and PyVista's data structures, and then coming back. And same with GemPy and etc. Because all of our libraries sort of can transform and alter these data into new data structures, and we have to make sure we have links and traceability across that data the whole time. And so that way, you know, if you're giving me some data from a new subsurface package, you send it to PyVista, we do a thresholding filter, all of a sudden we have a new data set. We don't know where that came from necessarily. We might want to send it back to our subsurface module for integration with something else. And so I think that's where I'm going to be interested in the most, and where I'm willing to help, is making sure there's traceability in our data and making sure we have dynamic links at sort of all parts of our pipeline, or our workflow rather.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But that's why I like a bit the idea of using PyVista and VTK as the templates, because they are all always manipulating 3D. And it's also the first thing that you want to do. Once you import the data into whatever format, you want to visualize it. And then you can just decide to which package you send it. But, and normally, I mean, the feeling I have is that once we are able to visualize it in PyVista, for all of us, it's pretty easy just to send to one place or the other. So again, I think it's more than code, it's a bit organization between what is out there and having a clear place where you add specific functionalities, parsers and these things.
It would be nice if we can, if we could pull those parsers and things into subsurface rather than you needing one for GenPy. And I think we can consolidate some of that effort there, and I think that's a big part of what this is about.
I think that is a huge part of it.
Yeah, and then reuse certain bits for different. Yeah.
And that would allow us to track how or change and be able to do it, and subsurface will be able to test the intercommunication between packages. That makes total sense, rather than each of us trying to always test against the other libraries.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody that we can approach from PyGimli as well?
Yes, Florian wrote me he's on camping this weekend because it's a long weekend in Germany, but he's definitely very interested, and I will.
He's also in Aachen now, so it seems a joke, the amount of us who are here, but now he's in Aachen, so I can't really just meet him physically in a couple of weeks.
Students now, no? So with all the lightning talk and stuff, you have a lot of masters and PhD students on GenPy. It's a lot of.
We are a virus.
Yeah, I just think it would be nice if we can get somebody from GenPy onto this sort of discussion group, whatever we want to call it.
PyGimli.
Project. Yeah, sorry, PyGimli. If we can get somebody from there on.
Yes.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be whoever the lead, the PyGimli project lead, but somebody who's going to be around for a while who can contribute back and keep PyGimli in the loop, basically.
Cool.
So like, since I'm working a lot with it, and Florian, I'm going to be following along this weekend for whenever I can fit it in, basically. And I'll make sure to keep him in the loop and follow along. But he's definitely interested, he told me as well.
And it's through Florian pinged you into the channel, right?
And for borehole data, that is something. So because Welly also should be part of this. So Martin, are you working with that, or?
I'm not overly familiar with it. I've had a look a little bit at the code, but I mean, I've only been doing stuff for Matt for a month now, and most of it's been run up to transforms. So
also in general, for everybody. So when we want to just load some borehole data and then just plot it, so Bain, you have some examples in PyVista, I guess, but I think that they are manual. So there is no a clear library, a go-to library for manipulating borehole data.
Yeah, I mean, as far as any examples with PyVista, it's been you've used whatever other software or reading routine you wrote yourself to get the well data into NumPy arrays and then manually create polydata in PyVista to do the plotting. And I've never used Welly, but I think it'd be awesome to integrate something that can parse different well formats like LastIO maybe as well, or whatever. Just because, I don't know, maybe someone else would know if there's another library out there that does all of the data structure management for well data.
So the thing is that last year, talking with Matt about that, he said that he didn't want to add geometry to Welly, that it was for logs, but they shouldn't be in 3D space. And in that, one of the sprints was in WellPathy, that now I think that is WellPathPy. But I don't know if that's done or if it's going somewhere. I don't know. No idea.
That's right. I think the other one that was raised was about GeoSci.xyz that maybe also should be more. Although GeoSci does a fair deal of statistics, right?
Yes and no. So what Jan was showing today, so we had coded quite a lot because we are also teaching it, but to just interpolating within a layer. But I think that is better eventually to link it to some of the other libraries.
So,
in the last couple of years, there were also a lot of push in different places.
yeah, that was another comment I sort of had, because I think like between what Verde is doing and what GeoSci is doing, they're both interpolations, right? They're both models, or you can do modeling. Verde does other stuff as well. But it'd be really cool if everyone used the scikit-learn API to implement this, even though it doesn't, like the fact that like GeoSci has like a separate point and orientation data frame makes it a little messy, but right, then you gain like all this like interfacing with all this infrastructure around model selection and cross-validation in the machine learning world. And like, I think that's also captured in like a GeoSci issue where it's like there's sort of like when you create a model, you're sort of knitting it, and then like you have like a base regular grid that you sort of fit the creating parameters to everything. And then you can, using like the compute model at function, like yeah, you init on the data you pass it, and then you can evaluate on a separate thing, right? But it's sort of like a clunky interaction. Now I have my own library that I'm working on for my private work that sort of is doing that, but it would be probably better to be done at a lower level in each library. So I think Verde is already sort of using the scikit-learn like estimator. I think that's the class. I'm forgetting. So that just like gives you a standard way of like whatever data I have, right, like fit into whatever model I have and get my predicts out.
If I understood you right, if you're talking using general interpolators, so to interpolate the scalar field of GeoSci using something else, the interpolator of GeoSci is completely is really strange. So it's not one of the base ones, because we are interpolating this scalar field that we don't care about the value. So we are interpolating differences of a scalar field to ensure that all the surfaces, they have the same surface. So there is nothing out there. So the alternative is interpolate assigning the scalar field to each surface before. So that would be a more normal way. But this interpolator is really specifically used for defining this type of structures. And then you have the faults that they affect and these things.
Yeah, and that's fine, right? It's not like, I mean, it's very like, that's like a very specific thing to GeoSci, but you don't need to worry about in terms, like, I'm just talking about like from an interface perspective where, yeah, like I could take my, like, I don't know, like taxi cab data set that I use in my, use in like a machine learning example and try to feed it into GeoSci. That's a stupid thing to do, but by making the APIs a bit more interface, I could, for example, there's like you have hyperparameters like the range and the nugget effects, the smooth parameters, and sort of making that work better with like hyperopt, Optuna, scikit optimize, and these other tools that exist out there from the machine learning world. Like you would get a lot of really interesting wins. It's just like a lot of like sort of jargon things that are like very specific to geostatistics that I see a lot of similarities to in the machine learning world. And that sort of there's a spectrum between machine learning and statistics that they're really the same thing, but we use different language.
I mean, I have to say that you are the first person looking at the algorithm of GeoSci and thinking in geostatistics, which is completely fair because it's kriging and you have all these hyperparameters, but it's such a specific use with such a specific configuration that I didn't even think of that. But, yeah.
I mean, like you don't, because the thing with the GeoSci, like you feed in the data, but you don't specify the targets besides the surfaces. Like you do work to say this surface, this formation corresponds to this scalar field ID value, right? Typically you have like a Y column like if you look at, you'll like whatever Medium posts you want to do to learn machine learning, like you have binary, like a binary classification, you have zeros and ones. You are like doing some work ahead of time and sort of intercepting that sort of step, and that's fine. But I think there's some wins basically that could happen where, like, if I maybe another like Surfy or map to loop, like that sort of exists. Like I could, have the same data structure and just say, instead of using GenPy, use map to loop or use Surfy, or if I guess Verde doesn't do 3-dimensional sort of like multi-surfaces, it really just does one at a time, right? But you could have sort of an agnostic front end to whichever interpolation algorithm you have behind the scenes.
Yep.
You're muted, Dieter.
Bloody muting. I pick you up on a keyword here, Andrew, because you mentioned, and I forgot I did, map to loop, and Mark Chessel reached out to me because this time is not very convenient for him in Australia. But so he's very much up for it too. So I think he would also be up to try and support whatever we do here.
So actually, yes, adding on that, that's a good point that you raise it. So I know that in the Loop project, they have quite a few libraries in terms of data structures, but with a lot of metadata. So they are really going to go for yet another standard. I have access to what they are working on, but actually I didn't check it out yet, and I didn't see anything tangible. But they are putting a lot of work about tidying up data in general. So 2 out of 6 work packages, 2 are just input and trying to capture knowledge, and that's going to be open source libraries in a year, in principle. But yeah.
So 52. Is there anything else you think we should cover today? Anyone who didn't give his opinion yet? Anything that got forgotten? Or are all good who want to work tomorrow to get started? I guess is the question.
I'll be working on something. Yeah.
I ever think we should probably keep this. It's now T20 Gostin, Transform Gostin channel. And I guess many of those channels, if they're inactive, they will get archived at some point. And I think we should probably just rename it at some point to Subsurface maybe, or whatever it's going to be called, and keep it active for
It actually exists already, so we can just take that over.
Sorry?
That actually exists already, the Subsurface channel for.
Okay. So we just take that one.
I don't think we can merge them, unfortunately, but we can just move the relevant stuff from this weekend and last weekend into that, and just
the most important point.
Squatters' rights.
And then also, it's probably a bit early, but it's just kind of one day more. So if you have anything interesting to share, a notebook, please put it in the channel again, because Sunday at some point I'm going to present a few things, and it would be cool to have a few images or notebooks. Or
yeah, I'll put mine in by Sunday morning, at least, latest. So I hope to get it done tomorrow.
Cool. I think, yeah. I think we're good to go. So there's Miguel, there's Tom, there's Martin, there's Andrew, there's Bain, there's Franklin. There are a lot who are willing to step up, and everyone else here as well, I guess, because they wouldn't be here. So yeah, communicate to your communities that you're going to support whatever comes out. That's the important bit. And that they're going to have to use it.
Sounds good.
So I'm curious, tomorrow people are going to do some hacking on this, right?
Yes, I will.
So, okay, so what's like the very high level game plan for the weekend? Because the Europeans are going to, and the Africans are going to wake up tomorrow, and what are you guys going to do? And then what should us Americans and Canadians?
So my idea is the first thing, just create a Kanban in the in the GitHub, so we can start putting issues and stuff there. But actually trying to load, for example, the example that you added last week could be starting. So start first loading it to the subsurface and from there to other libraries. Yeah, just an example.
I wonder, because like in gostin we have already notebooks, and I don't know in the subsurface are there already notebooks. I think if it's really something is getting started, we shouldn't repeat mistakes we've done in our projects earlier and have no notebooks in order to keep the repo small, right? So
okay. I get the hint.
So yeah, whatever will be the thing called, we should there start with plain Python files or other files.
No, we can always turn gostin into a notebook collection or something if we have to, the gostin repo, given that there've been a couple pushed there already. So even if that becomes an examples and then we keep the actual implementation cleaner in a different, in subsurface. I'm not sure what's there already. I haven't actually looked yet. Or in a new repo, you know.
Yeah, I think when you get up, Wayne, I think checking with Miguel would be the straightest forward. And I would say Miguel in the morning will probably take a bit the lead, and the other people, folks here in Europe, should check with him where there is help. And the easiest is to create issues, exactly. It worked quite well in other hackathons here as well. Just create issues and folks are picking them up and resolving.
Yeah, it'd be awesome to just keep filling out that project board, I guess, on the subsurface or the gostin repo.
I don't know, opinions?
So my idea is to start adding issues in subsurface.
Okay.
Now,
yeah,
if it's going to be in good state to start importing it and putting examples in gostin, that will be the ideal case, but I don't know if we will have time for that.
Yeah, I think we keep the gostin for notebooks and examples of this hackathon, and for the package we can go to the subsurface GitHub.
Sounds good.
Cool. Anything else? So,
no.
See you tomorrow, guys.
That is pretty awesome to see this group of people all together, I have to say.
It's a start.
I'm really glad to be part of this now.
What ghost did Martin put in his?
Martin, you have a ghost.
I haven't put a ghost. It's my father who walked in behind me.
Hey, Dad. See you later.
Headphones.